We are in a series talking about nailing down some things, some questions that we really at some point in time have to at least figure out where we stand. To say once and for all, this is where I am. No more waffling, no more back and forth. This is who I am. This is where I stand. And the question or the idea, the thought that we're going to nail down today is very simple. It's the basic fundamental question of why do I exist? Why am I here? Why, I don't mean in this room, but why do I even have breath? Why am I a part of this experience that we call life? Why am I here? And we don't often really get to the core of that question unless we are disappointed, discouraged, sad, or mad. And then we start asking the question. Because our response is, well, if it's not going to work out for me, then what's the point? Well, why am I even here? If I continue to do this and no one appreciates me, I continue to do this, I'm never rewarded, I continue to miss out on these opportunities, I continue to put myself out there and it never works out, then what is the point with all this? And we start asking some of those bigger questions and we get to that fundamental, basic question, why do I exist? Well, if there is a final authority, if there is an ultimate creator God who created heaven and earth and all that we see and all that we experience, then there is an answer to that. If this is actually His Word. If this is not His Word, then it's just a guess, even for those of us who believe that there is a God who exists. But if there is a final authority, a God above all who exists, and this is His actual Word, then that question of why do we exist is not really that difficult. It's not something we ponder for as long as we're here. It's pretty clear. So if this is His actual Word and God is the final authority, all we've got to do is open up to the very first chapter in the very beginning of the book that He's given us, and we find that. So I want us to take a look at that idea of why do I exist, and we'll hear it from Him. We'll hear it from God Himself. The very first chapter in the very first book. So Genesis chapter 1. If you have a Bible, open it up to there. If you're on your phone, just swipe out of the app that you're on and go to a different app, and we can get into this. It's fine. I'm sure your status will change several times while we're here together, but we can open this up, get to Genesis chapter 1. And in verse 26, we've already had 25 verses of an understanding, so to speak, of how things came to be. Less how and really more why, but we do have the created order and how God began to speak things into existence and put things there. And then we get to verse 26 on what we know to be the sixth day. And it says, God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God He created them. Male and female He created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth and all the birds in the sky and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it. I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all He had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So we have this pretty simple account, several words used over and over again, and we have the reason for our existence. It might not spell out as the reason I made you is this, but we can take a look at what He told us to do, how He created, and obviously understand our purpose, our reason for existence. So I want to share with you 3 words that I think will help us just begin to put some meat on the bone here to be able to hold on to and begin to process and think over and even remember. And the first word is relate. God created us in His image. And being made in the image of God doesn't mean that we're all equals with God. But first and foremost, it means that God created us with the ability to be able to relate to Him, to know Him back just as He knows us. And that ability to relate, to be in relationship with him, is a gift. And it's a gift that nothing else in creation had. God created a lot before he created man and woman, but he created us differently. Now, if you're a nature lover, I know many of you are. You love being outside. You love to look. You love to take pictures of it, whether it's a sunrise, a sunset, the mountains, the deep blue ocean, whatever it is, you love it out there, and that is great. When God created it, he said it's good. But it's different. Nature cannot relate back to God in the same way that you and I can. Nature cannot know God the way God knows what he made. Now, most of us aren't going to argue on the nature front, but let me go ahead and step into it. All right, animal lovers. Now, they're special, and God loves your pets, and it is great that you love your pets. And it's great that we sing songs and want to believe that it's like a veterinarian clinic in heaven, and we're just all going to be surrounded with all our... That's fine. But when God created animals, he did not create those animals in his image. I know your dog's wonderful. So are mine. I'm a dog person. I know your cats are wonderful. Anyway, I'm a dog person, so I know that you love your animals, and that is a great thing. We love ours. I mean, my daughter and I find ourselves just staring at them. My daughter has probably 3,000 pictures on her phone, and 2,800 of them are of our girl dog. I mean, it is ridiculous, and she'll show us, hey, look at this one, look at this one. They all look the same. Every one looks the same. But there are so many. I'm like, why don't you delete to get, no, I can't do that. Like, we get it. Like, we marvel, we love our animals. And there are times when we get that weird moment where you go, oh, look at them playing outside, running around. And then all of a sudden their backs hunch over in the yard. Like, what? Tell you what, let's not look right now. But even that, in a weird way, is like, oh, I mean, we love our animals. God loves your pets, but God did not create them in the same way that he created us. They don't have the ability to know God the way we are known. It is a gift to be able to relate, to be able to be in relationship with him. Thousands of years after this setting happened, there's a man named Paul, the author of most of the New Testament with the letters that he wrote to various churches. And in Acts chapter 17, he is in Athens, Greece, and he's talking with people, and he's explaining to people what it is that they're actually believing and the consequence of where they're putting their faith. And we have this really cool moment in Acts chapter 17 that will connect back to this creation story. In verse 22, Paul said, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I am going to proclaim to you, that God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. This kind of relationship is a gift. It is a gift that the rest of creation does not understand. It's a relationship and a gift that is an invitation to know him as we are known. But this idea of relating to God is going to continue to be like this unknown God moment in history for you until you get to a point where you are willing to understand that relating to him means relating to him on his terms. And because he's the final authority, he can do that. He gets to set the terms for how we actually come to him. And we don't relate to him as peers. We don't relate to him like, good job, God. Way to go on that one. You did a good job creating that and creating that moment. That's not the picture that we see here. In fact, if you look into the book of James, and we don't have these verses on the screen, and Pastor Mike mentioned some of those verses earlier from James, but James wrote, submit yourselves to God. Come near to God, He'll come near to you. Humble yourselves in God's presence, and He will lift you up. All that's in James 4. So when we come to God on His terms. I've referenced this before, but there was a time a few years back when I was looking to add to our team, and being a relatively young church and new at what's going on, there were, little by little we were adding to our team, and I wanted to make sure I had the right person. So I was a little overboard on some of the vetting process, and hey, I want to figure this out and understand that. And I talked to one guy and said, hey man, I feel like after our communication here that we need to have a phone call. I'm interested in talking with you more about this opportunity. He said, all right, let's do that. And I said, how about, and we set up a time. So we set up the time for the phone call. I don't remember what day it was or the time. I just know that I looked at the time, it hit, and as a normal person does, you don't call right at the second. You wait a couple of minutes. Don't be too eager, you know. So I waited 1 or 2 after, made the call. And mind you, I'm not a big deal, and I know that. I'm not even a big deal in my own home. Like, I'm just a guy. But in this structure and then this interview, I am the decision maker, and he is the one seeking employment. So there is just an expectation that goes along there. I called him, a couple minutes after the appointed time. The phone he picked up, and he just said, "What's up?" I had to step back because I wanted to check my ego at the door and realize I don't deserve to hear someone say, "Oh, it's a privilege and an honor to speak with you." Like, I know, but sup? Like I have the power to, what are we doing here? And if down the road, I do think he's kind of cool. If I ever hire him, we'll have a good laugh about it in front of y'all. But I'll let him mature first for a while. But that just set me back because I thought immediately, you have already crossed your name. Like, this isn't going to happen. Like, it's just not. I love the cool thing. I get it. They understated that's, but no, you're not going to sup me like we haven't even talked yet. And I also, in those moments, think about how casually I approach the presence of God and just step in and almost as if I'm saying, God, listen, I'll give you one more shot. This is what I want. This is what I'm asking for. If you'll meet that need, I'm all yours. But this is your moment. You got to show up for me. And if that's the case ever in my heart, I've got a feeling God's on the other end going, I kind of got your answer. We're not playing this game here. So I have this invitation to relate to God, but I do it on His terms, where I step in and realize I don't even deserve the breath He's given me. But if He would choose to show mercy in this moment, I'll present what it is I think I need, but I don't know. And I allow Him to work that out. So if you ever get to a point in your lives when you feel like everybody else has this confidence in their communication with God, and there's so much faith and so much trust and so much belief, and you just don't have that, you might want to step back and just examine your stance and position when you come into God's presence. Is this a gift that you're wanting to tap into, to say yes to be able to relate to Him because He's asked you to? Or is it a demand like, God, if you want to prove it to me, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm going to do my own thing. It's an awesome gift that He's given us and nothing else in creation for men and women to be able to relate to Him in the image of God. But in the image of God also gives us another idea. It's to reflect. We've been given this awesome privilege and even responsibility to reflect Him. Say, well, all creation does that. I mean, you can look out. I even see God's fingerprints all over stuff. Like when I'm see the mountains, or I look into the sky, or yes, we can see evidence of God in all of those things. But as nature at times can mirror the glory and the awesomeness of God, you and I have an opportunity created in His image to be able to mirror the character of God. And that's different. Nature can mirror the awesomeness of God. You and I have a chance by the way we are patient and by the way we show mercy and by the way we love even when we're not loved, by the way we're willing to lean into and trust and believe and show strength. And even in times of adversity, we get a chance in those moments to display the heart, the character of God in a way that nothing else in creation can. And so at times I have to step back and ask myself, God, do you see me when you look at me? Can you literally look at yourself when you see me? Or is there some dingy, dark, maybe it once was me, but that's not me anymore? Because all of the decisions I make throughout the day, the things I say and I speak and I do and I hear and I think, all of that in the end should be a mirror of God's own character. Now, that changed when Adam and Eve walked away from God, and we'll touch back on that in just a moment. But when they stepped away and did their own thing and sin was ushered in, it changed everything. It wasn't that the mirror was just warped anymore. It was gone. The image was gone. But when Jesus showed up and paid the price, he allowed us in that moment to come back home, to be back in his presence. And from that point forward, which is why we have one of our values to be celebrate every step, from that point forward, step by step, those who have returned home by faith in Jesus are able to be changed and begin to look more and more. It's as if the image in the mirror is getting clearer and clearer and clearer. And day by day, God is seeing more and more of himself and less of where we used to be. And that process, that journey, if you will, is in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18. He says, "And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory." That's that step-by-step idea, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. And this idea of being veiled, that was a reference to Moses when he used to put a veil over his face when he would go to speak with the people, because after he'd been with God, his face was literally shining and it was glowing to the point where they were afraid to even look at him, didn't want to look at him. And he says, we get to now, with unveiled faces, begin to declare the image of God. We get to be that mirror once again as we're being transformed little by little. So just as we have been created to relate to God, we've also been created to reflect his glory. And right now, the things that are going on inside your mind and heart, if those are not indicators of God's own character, then you and I are not living out our created purpose as he has spoken it to us. So to relate, to reflect, and then as you notice when we were reading through Genesis just a moment ago, there was a lot of this rule. And that's the third idea, rule. So relate, reflect, and rule. That is what God said is our reason for existence. Now, there are a lot of pieces to how we do that, and gifts and talents and abilities and opportunities, but it all boils down, according to God's own words, to being made in his image so that we can relate and reflect, and then also to rule. He talked about ruling creation, ruling all that was around, ruling the ground, ruling the plants, ruling. So there is a part of each of us that gets a little too big for our britches at times, and we lean into stuff that might not even be our business. And honestly, a lot of it goes back to here. God created us with the created purpose of ruling for him, not with him. He doesn't need help, but ruling for him, in a sense of saying, I made all of this, and now I want you to enjoy this. I want you to care for and protect creation, everything that I've made, just as I would if I was here. I'm going to allow you to do that. And in doing so, he allows us to see things grow from nothing into something and get a little glimpse of what it is like for him to be able to create and sit back and get joy and find glory in what's going on. He allows us to experience that, to protect and to care for our little corners of the world. Some of us lean a little bit more into that ruling, and sometimes we forget that we're not ruling with God, we're ruling for God. In other words, we are also going to implement his heart behind it all. So even in those moments when you're just bossing everybody around, you're getting kind of short with people in your home or at your work, your business, there's a little bit of that makes sense, because you were created to rule, but you were created to rule for God, as if you're ruling the way he would rule. When you ask someone to come and house sit when you go on vacation, those of you who do that, I've never done that, but anyway, sounds cool. But if you have enough stuff in your home that's big a deal, that you would have someone come do that, when you get back, you don't expect to have the walls painted different colors and one of your vehicles sold and your pets' names have been changed. Like that, just, no, that you care like I would care for my stuff and my home and my place. And in many ways, that's what God's asked of us. And we get it because we want to step in and we want to control and we want to protect and we want to shepherd and we want to make sure that everything works in accordance with our plan. It's just a little warped version of what God actually created us to do, and that is to rule for Him. And this is where the freedom kicks in, because we have the freedom to rule as He would rule or do our own thing. And we are all reaping the consequences of not ruling very well. God said, take care of my creation. We haven't done that really well. I'm not doing some environmental thing. I think I burned some styrofoam yesterday accidentally. But I just mean in general, we have not done a good job of taking care of His creation, and we're reaping the consequences in many ways. Our bodies created by Him. We haven't done a great job of taking care of that. Now, we've told other people how they should take care of their own bodies, but we don't always take care of our own. And we don't take care of the people even around us. We can spot other people who aren't taking care of the people around them, but sometimes we don't do so well with ours. So it begins by saying, God, where have you placed me on earth? I know you've created me to rule, and I want to rule for you. I want to rule in a way that you would have me rule. I want to honor you by the way I do this. And that's part of being created in His image. It's part of understanding that God created us to actually rule. So, if we've nailed it down that there is a final authority, and that final authority is the final authority in our lives, and if we've nailed it down that this is His actual word and we can know Him in this way, then according to His word, we have been created to be in relationship to Him, to be a reflection of Him, and to rule for Him. That's why we were made. And either we can accept, acknowledge, and honor that, or we can say, you know what, that's just not enough. So I don't think the question really is, why do I exist? The question is why God says I exist going to be enough for me? Because that was the issue with the first man and woman. Adam and Eve weren't at odds with God. They weren't mad. God had not held anything, from them, and that didn't lie to them in any way, although that was a part of the back and forth with the enemy. It was a man and woman who had been given everything. They were created to relate, to reflect, and to rule. And then at one weak moment, not with any evil intended, they just said, you know what? That's not enough for me. That's not enough for me today. I want more. And so they stepped outside of their creative purpose and they killed everything. Literally. Killed the whole deal. The dream. Killed the relationship. Killed the ability to reflect. Killed the ability to rule well. Everything fell apart because they want to wreck the world? No. They want to ruin everything for every person that comes after them? Absolutely not. Because they wanted a different God, they didn't like Him? Absolutely not. Because they simply said, this is why I'm made? Maybe there's more. And that is the real question that we all have to face. Are we going to be okay with realizing that is our creative purpose? I'm not saying we can't strive to be great. Don't be afraid to be great. God gave you talents and abilities. Push it. See what happens. Allow your influence to grow so that other people can look at you and go, wow, what a great God that they serve. Don't be afraid to be great, but understand that your created purpose is not to rule with God. Your created purpose is not for the world to look at you. And your created purpose is not to be able to say, hey, I don't need anyone. I can stand alone and do my own thing. We've actually been created to be in relationship with the God that we rely on, to reflect His goodness to Him, not even speaking about to those around us, just to Him. And then ultimately to understand that we have all been given opportunities to rule. You say, well, okay, if Adam and Eve, even though they seem to show some remorse and they seem to have a lot of regret, if they weren't allowed to go back into the garden, then what do we do? How do we do this thing? Well, again, Jesus showed up. There's another R word, redeemed. He showed up and He redeemed us. He allowed us to come home. And once we're home, our natural question is to say, what do I do now? Okay, now I realize this. Okay, I stepped outside my lane. I'm coming back home. I'm here. What do I do now? We're always wanting to figure out what our how is. How am I supposed to get beyond this? But your why rather is always going to be greater than your how. Your why is always going to be more important than your how. most of us, when we come into a place like this, you want the preacher, whoever's speaking, to give you 4 or 5 things you can implement to be able to accomplish this. That's just how we approach life. Go to class, we take notes. I mean, when you're taking notes, do you ever take notes on the little illustration that the professor? No. Just get to the things that will be on the test. Tell me the 3 things. I'll write them down. I'll memorize those and move on. We're all about what? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Instead of stepping back and saying, why am I here? And your why is always going to be bigger. Next week, we're going to look into the, how do I walk through this? What is next, if you will? But your why is so important. Because if every day I am not pursuing a closer relationship with God, and if every day I'm not asking myself, God, does what I'm doing, does that look like something you would do? And if every day I am not doing what I can to rule for Him, to protect those people and care for those people around me in the way that He would if He Himself were here, then I'm not living out my why. So the question really is that enough? Is that enough for us? So as we pray together today, and we're still at the beginning of the year and setting the tone, I believe, for what's to come, I want to give you an opportunity to reaffirm, or maybe for the first time to say, this is what I believe. This is who I am. And if this is why you made me, this will be my purpose, my existence that I lean into. So I can't tell you how to pray, what to pray, but I am going to pray for you and with you. And if these are the prayers that you want in your own life, I pray that you would silently echo those with me. So would you join me in prayer, please?